You know, one of the most common supports for making same-sex marriage legal is that it's unfair to gay and lesbian couples to deny them the status of marriage, while at the same time affirming that for heterosexual couples. One of the things I think we need to think about in terms of evaluating the whole case for same-sex marriage is, for one, this fairness argument. And I think if it justified unequal treatment of gays and lesbians, then I think then the charge of unfairness has some serious merit to it. But it seems to me that civil unions provide for all the same types of treatment and all the same privileges of marriage that heterosexual marriage provides for married couples. So it's not altogether clear that it's unfair. And I've often wanted to ask same-sex couples, what is it if the treatment is the same under civil unions as opposed to marriage? And if it's not the same, then it ought to be. But if it's the same, then what exactly does the designation of marriage give you that you don't already have? And it seems to be something like the symbolic acceptance of homosexuality in the moral dimension as a valid, morally acceptable alternative lifestyle. And that's where the legal discussion sort of morphs into the moral one. And I'd want to clarify on the legal discussion, I'd want to raise another question, I think, to the advocates of same-sex marriage, and that is, what is it that prevents you from discriminating against couples that are bisexual and couples that want to become more than couples? I mean, it seems to me if the autonomy argument is given as the basis for justifying same-sex marriage, which is that people have the right to love and be married to whoever they want to, then that's discriminating against couples that are bisexual. And bisexuality is put under the same legal designation as hetero and homosexuality. It seems to me that intrinsically discriminates against bisexual couples who can't have their autonomy fulfilled by only limiting marriage to one person. And so it seems to me that this opens the door to multiple marriages. It also opens the door to various we've typically called incestuous marriages, assuming that the relatives are of the age of reasonable consent. And some have actually even suggested that this gives rights to people who we have traditionally called pedophiles to engage in adult-child relationships, assuming that some reasonable degree of consent can be given by the child. So the advocate of same-sex marriage, I think, that's a tough question that I think they have to answer, unless we just kind of throw it all the way open to anybody's definition of marriage that they want to be connected with, in which case there'd probably be no reason why something like what we've traditionally called bestiality, there'd be any reason to prohibit that either. And there's some pretty notable figures, Peter Singer included, who has refused to condemn bestiality based on these autonomy grounds. I think that strikes most people in our culture as going way beyond what the boundaries are. So the question about, I think, the morality of homosexuality is something that the Bible does speak to. We ought to distinguish, I'm not sure the Bible clearly makes that distinction between someone's attraction and someone's behavior. And I think we ought to say that the same-sex attraction, as long as it's not chosen, is not something for which people are morally culpable. Right? It's the behavior, it's acting out on that attraction when it gives way to lust or any further acting out on that. And I think somewhat analogous, I don't think there's anything morally problematic with someone being attracted to a person that they're not married to. As long as it doesn't give way to lust, which I would say Jesus defined as the mental act of adultery, or any further acting out on that. And I think this gives us a way in our churches to welcome people who wrestle with their sexual orientation without necessarily affirming homosexuality as a valid alternative lifestyle, which I think the Scripture prevents us from doing. Now, the area of sexual ethics, which we cover in chapter 10 here, also has to do with things like birth control. And we want to be really careful to distinguish between birth control that is contraceptive and birth control that is abortifacient. So things like the morning after pill, or what are called Ella drugs, which are, as far as I can tell, up to a week after pills, are generally abortifacient since they prevent fertilized eggs or embryos from implanting into the uterus. Things like RU486, which actually expels implanted embryos from the uterus, would also be things that are abortifacient. Contraceptive things include sponges, foams, condoms, things like that actually prevent sperm and egg from coming together. A more controversial one concerns the run-of-the-mill birth control pill, which its general design is to be contraceptive, essentially not allowing for ovulation. And there's some debate about whether the pill has an abortifacient capacity or not. So that can be a very interesting discussion that takes place in your classrooms on this. And we've in the chapter in moral choices, we've given some other resources that can help you sort of frame that debate for your students.